Call the Assembly Public Works and Facility Committee listening session for the Juneau North Douglas Crossing to order. Ms. Treem, would you please do our land acknowledgement?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We would like to acknowledge that the city and borough of Juneau is on unceded Tlingit land and wish to honor the indigenous people of this land. For more than 10,000 years, Alaska Native people have been and continue to be integral to the well-being of our community. We are grateful to be in this place, a part of this community, and to honor the culture, traditions, and resilience of the Tlingit people. Gunachish.
Thank you, Ms. Treem. Mr. Crabtree, would you note our roll, please? All right. Are there any requests for changes to this very short agenda? Seeing none, this agenda is approved. So to the public, thank you so very much for coming out on this gorgeous heat wave, warm night. I am truly honored at your presence. I was concerned how many people would pick sun over testimony for North Douglas Crossing. And so I greatly appreciate you coming for this. We're going to just jump right into it. Director Kester, if you want to say something before we get the project team on to discuss the screening process so we can get straight to testimony this evening.
Thank you, Chair Bryson. Christian, if you could pull over Steve Noble with Dowell, and I will just do a brief introduction for tonight. We have a very short presentation from Dowell just to get everyone up to speed on where we are in the Pell process. And just want to emphasize that this meeting was called by the Assembly and by Chair Bryson to provide the public an opportunity to speak to your elected officials about the proposed alternatives and where the Pell is in the process. It is not part of the Pell process itself because we are just, CBJ is just a partner with Pell. DOT is running the Pell project with our partners, Dow Engineering, who's the consultant that DOT has hired and will be presenting to you tonight. So wanted to make that clear. The project team with DOT is Marie Heidelman. She's lead for DOT. Katie Kester, that's me. I work with Irene Gallion for CBJ. And then Steve Noble is the lead project manager for Dow. And I will just turn it over to you, Steve.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to give you a brief presentation. Hopefully you all can hear me. If not, please somebody speak up.
No, you're loud and clear,
Katie,
sir.
Thank you. So Katie covered the first two slides, so let's just jump straight to slide 3, which talks about the schedule. So we started this project in spring of 2022, and we've been trying to have a pretty steady involvement from the public as we've gone along, so that we don't have what we don't want to have is long periods of not hearing from you. So I appreciate the opportunities like this. We've had several public meetings, we've had several advisory committee meetings, listening sessions with the public over the last year, and appreciate opportunities like this to continue to get the word out about where we are in the process. And so as most of you know, we had a public meeting and a public process that was fairly robust in the early part of this year. We had and then we had another set of advisory committee meetings, and that was all part of kind of wrapping up what we call the level 1 screening, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail shortly. But right now we are still on track for wrapping up the PEL study by, it has pushed out a little bit. We were kind of looking at early fall for completion of the PEL study. I would say now we're probably looking at early winter for completion of the PEL study, late fall, early winter. And the major activities left to be completed is completion of the detailed level 2 screening, and then preparation of the final PEL study, at which time we'll have another public open house and a public comment period. There's also one more, at least one more, well, right now there's one more advisory committee meeting also scheduled. That was going to be in June, early June. It's looking like late June or July now at this point. So we appreciate the advisory committee. We've had a very active participation in our advisory committee and stakeholder committee, and appreciate their involvement. I think the purpose and need statement, next slide, is there's nothing new on the slide. The purpose of this project is to identify ways to improve connection between Douglas Island and Juneau, with secondary purposes to improve transportation for non-motorized users and to reduce transportation related energy consumption. And then the need is focused around providing alternate access and transportation infrastructure resiliency, and then decreasing traffic pressure on Douglas Island Bridge and its intersections. And then we've gotten a variety of comments from the public over the course of the last year, and kind of the 4 main additional goals that have been that they're technically not part of the purpose and need, but they're additional goals that we're striving to achieve with the alternative is improving connection to North and West Douglas by creating additional traffic capacity to support future development of affordable housing and economic development opportunities, enhancing and protecting public health and safety of travelers in the communities that transportation facilities traverse and serve, creating transportation improvements that avoid, minimize, and mitigate impacts to the environment and to residential areas, and then creating transportation improvements that maintain the visual, cultural, and scenic identity of Juneau and Douglas Island. So we'll jump right into the alternatives here. We as part of the level 1 screening, we had at one point we had about 9 alternatives, and the level 1 screening screened out 3 of those alternatives, and we are now carrying forward to level 2 screening, which means that we're going to do much more detailed evaluation of these alternatives. And I guess one of the main points to point out here is that originally there were 5, and based on the public comments and evaluation in response to the public comments, we've added the 6th one, which in this case is the Mendenhall Peninsula alternative on the west side there. So all 6 of those alternatives will be carried forward to the level 2 screening, which means we're generating preliminary plans and profiles and actually identifying the footprint and being able to generate quantities and square footage of impacts to wetlands and to the refuge and to all the different criteria that are part of that detailed level 2 screening criteria. And we're just still at the very beginning of that, but I did want to kind of point out next slide. I wanted to point out where we are at with one of the key things people have asked us about is, and we kind of illustrate here on the origin destination study. There's been quite a bit more as part of the origin destination study, but kind of the one of the main points of this is how much use would the various routes get versus, so as a percentage of the existing traffic that's using the Douglas Island Bridge, which is currently somewhere between 15 and 18,000 cars a day, depending on the day. About 5 to 15% of that traffic would use the Mendenhall route, and about 20 to 30% of it would divert to the Sunny Point or Vanderbilt alternatives, and about 40% of that would divert to the Twin Lakes or Salmon Creek alternatives. So that's as a percentage of the existing traffic. It is not referring to traffic that might be generated as a result of any future development on Douglas Island. So we wanted to kind of illustrate that point. So maybe just to give a little bit of background of where we've been, the alternative screening, where does level 2 screening fall here? We have had a pre-screening, which was the first 6 or 9 months of the project, was really just a brainstorming effort with the public to get an idea of all the alternatives that we should evaluate. We narrowed that down to about 9 alternatives that made it to, that we then went through kind of a high level, what we call level 1 screening, which was really trying to eliminate those that didn't meet the purpose and need, didn't meet specific regulatory requirements, or that had really what we viewed to be kind of insurmountable engineering and environmental impacts or technical feasibility or practicability issues that we didn't feel like they should be carried forward. So, and that's primarily the alternative, which was kind of a tunnel option on the north side of the airport, the Eagle Creek crossing option, and then a parallel bridge to the existing bridge. Those are the three that didn't make it past level 1 screening. The rest have made it through to level 2. And as I said, we're going to be after level 2. What comes out of level 2 screening is that we have a handful of alternatives, or it could be one, but we envision that it will likely be more than one alternative that will be at the end of level 2 screening. We'll have recommended alternatives that will be they're not recommended for implementation. They're recommended to be carried forward into the NEPA process. That's what the word recommended means in this case. So the PEL process is a pre-environmental documentation effort. And so we go through the level 2 screening, we do the detailed analysis, and then these are the and what comes out of the level 2 screening are the alternatives that we recommend, the design team will recommend, project team, I should say, will recommend move forward into the really where the decisions truly get made, which is in the environmental documentation phase on which alternative will then be implemented. So next slide, after the PEL study wraps up, you can kind of see a little slide here that just kind of gives us a snapshot of where the project goes from here. After our PEL study will wrap up in fall of 23, probably, or maybe winter at this point. We'll get back in touch with folks on this actual schedule as some things start to unfold over the summer. Then if there's funding to move forward, then the alternatives that make it through the PEL level 2 screening will advance to preliminary engineering and NEPA. That process usually takes at least 2 years. And if there's continued funding and if an alternative is made to move forward and the no build alternative is not chosen, then the project would move into the engineering design phase, which again takes another roughly 2 years. And then right-of-way acquisition, also typically 2 years. And then construction would be completed over several years. So this is not a project that would be going to construction next year or anything like that. It's a project of this size and complexity. It's probably going to take at least 6 years or more from this point forward to get to construction. So next slide. So that's the presentation. That's the update I have for you today. I appreciate the opportunity to give you that update. And here's our contacts if folks have questions or comments. And I'll turn the time back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Noble, for the presentation. We greatly appreciate it. And I'd like to note that Mr. Noble did include during the presentation that it was public testimony that brought back the Mendenhall Peninsula option. It had been eliminated, but because enough public testimony came forward, they added it back into it. So these public testimony, the last time we did this, all of your statements were collected and given to the Dow group, and they use that. And Director Kester, I would imagine that we're going to compile all of this testimony and submit it to Dow for their use as well. Is that correct?
Certainly, the project team will review this testimony. It is outside of the official PEL. We've kind of gone a little rogue and said we want to have direct testimony from the public. So that's why this meeting is to the assembly and not to the project team.
Thank you, Director Kester. All right, does the committee want to include it? Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question, Mr. Noble. So I guess just so I'm certain and the public is as well, the chance for the public to be commenting as you finish the PEL looks like there's a public comment period, 30 days or something, happening in summer, fall of this year. Is that correct?
So there will be, first, good question. So there will be a comment period for the advisory committees and stakeholder committees after their presentation that will occur before that public open house. But yes, the general public comment period will be It'll start probably a little bit before the public open house, but it'll be a 30-day long public comment period that will kind of typically be on both sides of that open house. We'll make sure that that's properly notified so that the public understands that when they could provide that comment. And typically, our plan is to kind of have a draft version of the PEL that's released, that's publicly available, so the public can review what are the recommendations, and then the public will have a chance to actually provide feedback on those recommendations before anything is finalized.
Good, thank you.
Any additional comments or questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, we are going to move right into public comment. We're going to go to the room first to thank all of you for coming in tonight. After that, we will go to Zoom testimony, and I will read the Zoom instructions when we get to that time. Do we have a sign-in sheet, Mr. Crabtree? All right. So initially, based off the number of people that testified last time that we did this, I was planning on 3 minutes. We have a few more people tonight to testify. I'm going to reduce it down to 2 minutes. If you could please contain your comments into that time period. I'm going to begin with in person. I believe I have Ron Somerville is our first person signed up to speak. On deck, if you could be prepared, is Tom Williams, followed by Albert Shaw. And so we'll keep this moving as quickly as we possibly can. If you could say, when you are testifying, if you could tell us your name and what part of town that you live in for the record. You do not have to give us your address, just what part of town you live in. And sir, you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Ron Somerville. I live in the Valley. I testified the last meeting, so if you told me to get up and let somebody else testify, I'd appreciate it, but I'm not going to cover the same things I did. So there's been a few things that have happened since then, so that will help. I also quickly want to emphasize that I'm part of the Mendenhall Wetland Study Group that we created to essentially focus on this, which consists of primarily professional people who have a long history of dealing with the wetlands here in Juneau. And also TSI has supported our positions and the Juneau Shooting Sports Foundation. We're not opposed to a second crossing. I said that before. Our objective has always been to minimize negative impacts to the wetlands and the refuge. And I did have a handout that if you look at that, you'll see we support the Salmon Creek crossing. But I wanted to say that we have not gone to our group to have an in-depth discussion about the Mendenhall Peninsula route. However, and the things that we have identified as being the most important, minimizing impacts to the wetlands and refuge. The Mendenhall Peninsula is outside the refuge. It, by the way, was the first proposal that was ever made for crossing the Mendenhall, the route here across to North Douglas. Since we only have a little bit of time, I want to encourage the assembly to participate. I'm hoping that we don't throw away all the benefits we have from the wetlands in order to have some benefits in the other direction for people who want to go quicker to Eagle Crest, or you want to develop the backside, but that's 40 or 50 years in the future. Don't throw away what we have already. We've also, the group has identified the bench road we feel is being forgotten, and the people in Douglas really need that bench road before any crossing is done. I guess that's my.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Somerville. Now up we have Tom Williams. On deck is Albert Shaw. And again, if you keep the microphone close to your mouth so that everybody can hear everything that you're trying to communicate to us. Mr. Williams, you may begin.
Hello, my name is Tom Williams. I live out on Fritz Cove Road. And I did pass out a handout to everyone that if I don't get it all through it, then you're welcome to read it on your time. I urge you to support the Mendenhall Peninsula alternative. There's 4 good reasons why it is much better than any of the other 5. The first and very important is what Mr. Somerville testified to. It avoids, although it looks like it cuts may cut in there a little bit, but not any of the real dramatic portion of the Mendenhall wetlands. It avoids that. So we avoid we avoid more stringent environmental analysis. We avoid getting people up in arms and potential lawsuits. The second really good thing is that the Mendenhall Peninsula offers a way to go across. We have this North Douglas crossing without necessarily impacting any property owners. I mean, you don't have to, you could avoid the right of way for the most part, or at least the portion that would force private property owners to relocate. The third and a very important part of this is that it provides the opportunity to make more housing available. If you had a road down the peninsula, you would have lots on both sides. And that's good because the city could sell those lots. And it's even better because when people buy those lots and build homes on them, it provides not only some spectacular views, but some property tax revenues. The fourth one is by intersecting the North Douglas at the north end of the road, you actually reduce traffic. Now, the display that they set up there, it just talks about the traffic that's going across the existing bridge, but to the extent that there would be development out there in maybe a long time, but maybe not, the people that would normally head south could head north. You could get tourism over there. You can get to Eagle Crest better, increasing those revenues. And I'm going to say one more thing. Obviously, the cost is the biggest drawback here, but you need to consider the marginal cost because they're all going to be expensive. And I think if you consider the marginal cost versus the marginal benefit, the Mendenhall Peninsula is clearly the best option here.
Thank you for testifying tonight, Mr. Williams. We appreciate it. Albert Shaw, and is Linda Baker in the room? Linda Baker, anyone? Nope. Okay. So we have Albert Shaw on deck, Dick Farnell. Mr. Shaw, if you could introduce yourself, what part of town, and you may begin, sir.
My name is Albert Shaw. I'm a resident of the city. In order of preference, the west or the east end of the runway, Sunny Point, Vanderbilt Hill intersection. Mendenhall Peninsula gets a big no from me. The flats is changing. If I could live long enough, which they probably won't let me, there'll be trees out there all the way. You won't see down the channel. They're already growing. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Dick Farnell, and then Ron signed up twice. We'll go to Matt Robus is on deck. Dick Farnell. Introduce yourself and what part of town, you may begin.
Good evening. My name is Dick Farnell. I live at 800 F Street. And I've been a Juneau resident for over 40 years. That part of F Street is in the vicinity of the Douglas Bridge there, so I'm near the action there. Just after I got here 40 years ago, we were having this same discussion about a second channel crossing. I recall at that time a big need expressed for the second crossing was to alleviate rush hour traffic on the Juneau Douglas Bridge, the same as DOT is now using to justify the current project. And back then, to that end, a consultant developed an elaborate analysis to try to explain the cause of the perceived traffic backup and to justify the need for a second crossing. This analysis was subsequently severely discredited and as having no basis. And so as a lesson, I caution the city to require a new traffic pattern study by DOT to study bridge congestion, since based on past experience, they can't be trusted to provide an accurate assessment. And make sure they identify that new traffic patterns have resulted from new COVID commuting that show reduced amount of rush hour traffic. Regarding the bridge congestion that DOT states is a problem, I undertook my own survey this past Tuesday morning from an observation point on the bridge from 7:30 a.m. to 8:10 a.m. to assess traffic backup. I chose a point on the bridge where I could observe traffic at both ends, at both the Egan Drive end and the Douglas Roundabout end on the other side. Results, the maximum traffic backup at the Egan Drive light observed during this period was 12 vehicles deep, and their wait time in line was approximately 30 seconds. All vehicles in this group made it through the light in one go. On the Douglas roundabout, the maximum backup was 6 vehicles coming from downtown Douglas. All of these moved through the roundabout within approximately 20 seconds. So my question would be, congestion, what congestion? At an FYI, a second channel crossing would do nothing to alleviate morning traffic on the bridge because, as I observed, the main thing holding up inbound traffic is the inbound bridge traffic is the inbound traffic on Egan Drive. So a diversion of traffic further up the channel onto Egan Drive would just mean that the bridge traffic has to wait longer for a green light than they would with no traffic to diversion by a second bridge. Instead, well, because of the concern about emergency response and so forth, if the bridge were taken out, I thought of a concept instead of a bridge to nowhere or a bridge for no reason for 90 million, or maybe to turn into 490 million. Thinking outside the box, a solution would be to buy a ferry like the Ketchikan Airport ferry, dock it at a pre-constructed dock on either side of the channel, and use it as in case the bridge incident occurs. During the summer, the city could lease it out to otherwise unused ferry to private tour companies that could run tours in Gastineau Channel, et cetera, et cetera. Private sector go crazy. Also remember, there's helicopters. If you feel the urge to spend millions in free money, why not do something meaningful that the community can use every day, like a hydro-powered light rail system between downtown and the valley with electric bus transfer nodes between Douglas, Lemon Creek, and Interior Valley and Glacier and the university. Maybe it would be the world's first exclusively hydro-powered rail system.
Mr. Parnell, unfortunately, we've gone over the 2 minutes. I missed the timer, but I gave you some extra time because I wasn't. But that extends your time. That's the extent of it. Sorry for the. All right. We've got Matt Robus on deck, John Wilcock. If you could introduce yourself and say what part of town you're from, and you may begin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. My name is Matthew Robus. I live south of the existing bridge on Douglas Highway. I'm a member of the Southeast Alaska Land Trust Board of Directors, and I'm representing the Land Trust tonight. The Land Trust has been actively participating in the Pell study as a member of the Technical Advisory Committee because we're both a landowner of properties around the margin of the refuge, as well as a compensatory mitigation sponsor with the Corps of Engineers. The Land Trust has been working for 25 years to conserve private properties adjacent to the refuge to ensure the integrity of the refuge's boundaries. We now have 22 conservation parcels adjacent to the refuge. We own or hold conservation easements or deed restrictions on those parcels. The majority of those conservation properties were acquired as to provide compensatory mitigation for refuge wetlands that were developed during the airport 2009 expansion project. Our mission, as agreed to by CBJ, the Corps of Engineers, and the Seal Trust, is to manage those wetland parcels in perpetuity to compensate for the effects of airport expansion. The East Sunny Point alternative crosses directly through mitigation sites owned by the Seal Trust. The West Sunny Point alternative is depicted as passing outside of our boundaries, but would likely result in significant impacts to the wetland function of those mitigation sites. As stewards of these conservation properties and mitigation sites, it is our legal responsibility to protect both the financial investment in our conservation holdings and the unique character of the lands we steward. The Land Trust welcomes necessary development for the community of Juneau, and it is something we help facilitate through our wetland mitigation program. However, we believe that the refuge is not a suitable location for a second crossing, as exemplified by the state and federal requirements to look for feasible off-refuge alternatives in preference to anything involving this legislatively designated special area. The Mendenhall wetlands have been identified as an important bird area with global significance and serves as a critical habitat for birds, salmon, and other fish species. It's a favorite recreation destination, and it's a place of significance for the tribes of Southeast Alaska. There is no compelling rationale to fragment and harm these community resources, as the Pell study has already identified crossing locations outside of the refuge's boundaries that would satisfy the study's identified purpose and need. The Land Trust urges CBJ and the Pell study to focus on alternatives that ensure protection of the Land Trust private conservation lands and mitigation sites, as well as the refuge. Because neither the Eagle Creek nor downtown alternatives will be advancing beyond level 1 screening, we believe that the Salmon Creek location is the remaining most suitable option to be advanced by the study, as it is located adjacent to the southern boundary of the refuge. With careful design, the Mendenhall Peninsula alternative may also be constructed without adverse impacts to the refuge.
Mr. Robust, that is your time. For some reason, my timer is stopping and not making noise. Director Kessler, you can take over timing. I don't know why it's not giving me a thing.
Thank you.
Mr. Robust, thank you. Now up, John Wilcock on decks. Thank you, sir, and appreciate you coming tonight. So that was John Wilcock. Alex Wertheimer, am I saying that right? Followed by Frank Rue. Mr. Wertheimer, if you would just introduce yourself and say what part of town, and you may begin.
My name's Alex Wertheimer. I live out the road about 17 mile. And I thank you for the opportunity to comment on the North Crossing level 1 alternatives. The primary needs identified for the crossing is alternative access and infrastructure resiliency and decreasing the traffic pressure on the existing bridge. All of the remaining alternatives meet these needs in some fashion, but there is a gradient to how well they meet the emergency access concern, especially in terms of medical transport. The Salmon Creek crossing stands out as the best alternative to provide reduced transport response time, with it placing you at the intersection with the hospital. Another goal of the project is to avoid, minimize, and mitigate impacts to the environment and maintain the visual, cultural, and scenic identity of Juneau and Douglas Island. It is difficult to overstate the ecological, environmental, recreational, and scenic importance of the wetlands encompassed by the study area. The state of Alaska recognized the importance of the wetlands by establishing the Mendenhall State Game Refuge. The incremental destruction and sectioning of the wetlands that has occurred over the past century emphasizes the need for choosing a crossing alternative that has minimal impact on the integrity of the refuge and the ecosystem functions of the wetlands. As I said in the March 2nd listening session, the best way to maintain the integrity of the refuge is to keep the crossing out of the refuge. In accordance with AS 1620-034, the Mendenhall Wetlands State Management Plan specifies that the use for a public transportation corridor is allowed only if there is significant public need for the corridor which cannot be reasonably met off refuge. Two reasonable alternatives have been presented, Salmon Creek and Mendenhall Peninsula. Salmon Creek is the best option to minimize impacts to the refuge and associated wetlands while meeting the needs identified for the project. Salmon Creek has the advantage of an existing interchange with Egan Drive, and as previously noted, provides the best emergency access. The Mendenhall Peninsula crossing could also be designed to have a de minimis effect on the refuge.
All right. Mr. Wertheimer, you may finish your statement there, sir.
Okay, one thing I'd like to note is that improved access to North Douglas for expanded commercial residential development must be in conjunction with the planning for the North Douglas Bench Road to accommodate increased traffic flow, no matter where the crossing itself is located.
Mr. Wertheimer, thank you very much for testifying this evening. Now up, Frank Rue, on deck, Mike Stanley. Mr. Rue, if you would introduce yourself, say what part of town you're from, and you may begin, sir.
Thank you, Frank Rue. I live on Sunny Point. I wrote you all an email, so you hopefully have that in front of you, but I'll read it. I have only 2 minutes and I don't want to go down too many rabbit holes. So I'm pleased to see that two alternatives that did not significantly impact the Mendenhall State Game Refuge, Salmon Creek and Mendenhall Peninsula crossing options are proposed for the Pell Level 2 analysis. I urge the Assembly to support keeping both alternatives in the mix as the community analyzes the advantages and disadvantages of the crossing options and debates which option provides the most benefits for the least cost to the community. I also urge the Assembly to keep in mind the importance of the Mendenhall wetlands. Sometimes we take the familiar for granted. Briefly, the Mendenhall wetlands rank with the Stikine Flats and the Yakutat forelands as the three top bird migration stopovers in Southeast Alaska. Pretty good company. They provide important spawning and rearing areas for salmon and other fish and in turn support commercial and sport fisheries and tourism attractions, such as even whale watching. They also provide important public uses by Juneauites and visitors alike. Finally, I urge the Assembly to take a hard look at the Salmon Creek Hospital Drive intersection project. The previous assemblies reviews that have looked at the second crossing have given this option short shrift. I don't think you should. I think Salmon Creek Hospital Drive is a preferred option because it's the most affordable, and with capital budgets the way they are, affordability is critical in competing with other projects throughout Alaska and getting on the state's priority list. It's permittable. This option can be built without impacting the refuge. Both federal and state law requires that if there is a feasible and reasonable off-refuge option, it must be selected. It's the best access to the hospital for all of Juneau and Douglas. It diverts the most traffic off the existing bridge. And finally, direct access to land currently zoned D18 with sewer, read affordable housing. Thank you.
Mr. Rue, thank you for coming and testifying tonight. Greatly appreciate it. Now up is Mike Stanley, followed by Rob Mergerthaler. I hope I got that right, Rob. Mike, if you'd introduce yourself, what part of town, and you have 2 minutes, you may begin, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bryson. Mike Stanley, I'm a resident of North Douglas, and I am appearing today on behalf of the Second Crossing Committee of the North Douglas Neighborhood Association. We've been actively involved in this process, not only in this PEL study, but in the prior go around back in 2004 to 2007. I can't cover all the points that we've made to Dowell and all that today, but the one thing I really do want to emphasize is for us, perhaps the biggest issue is traffic. The North Douglas Highway is dangerous and is you would never design a highway like that for the capacity that it is now experiencing with multiple driveways in and out. So we definitely think a bench road needs to be in the mix. Now I understand that's not part of the PL process; it's way down the road. But the alternatives ought to at least consider how you would connect to a bench road. In other words, are some of the alternatives, would they provide a better access to a bench road if one were built? And the reason that that's important is because right now it's they're just showing, okay, we're going to land somewhere on the island. The alternatives don't really give much information at all about what is going to happen on the island side. We know on the mainland side, okay, you've got intersections where the crossing would leave. But on the island side, it's very scant as far as the information. And I really hope that in the level 2 analysis, that a lot more attention is paid to, what's going to happen on the island side. What's that going to look like? What's that connection going to look like? And which of those connections would be, would take into account possible intersection with a bench road. Now, obviously, that means uphill. So yeah, it's not just coming to the shoreline. It's also thinking about if you're going to extend a crossing uphill to a possible bench road. Thank you.
Mr. Stanley, thank you so much for testifying this evening, sir. All right. Now up, Rob Mergerthaler. Catherine Coghill, you're on deck. If you introduce yourself, say what part of town you're from, and you have 2 minutes, you may begin.
Thank you. My name is Rob Morgenthaler. I live in Nock Bay. I will say that I'd been part of the advisory committee with the Pell study previously with the Forest Service. I'm no longer with the agency. So I do have some been exposed to a lot of the talks and what's gone on. So a couple of things I'd really like to point out for the city that I think is really important. Number one, that prior to, like Mr. Bryson said, prior to the public meeting, that the advisory committee really concluded that the Mendenhall Peninsula crossing really was not a feasible crossing. Okay. But then through public testimony, that was put back in. And the reason that we talked about that is because it's a very, very long way. It's a huge causeway. You have a number of different issues. It's kind of right on the edge for the wetlands, but it's going to impact the wetlands. You're talking fisheries and bird life, not to mention
I was at these meetings. The Alaska Airlines was very concerned about a high bridge that you're going to need to build there, a causeway, because you have literally the biggest boat storage area in Juneau is up the Mendenhall River at the end of Industrial Boulevard. I don't know if people know that. You're going to have a really big crossing there, and it's going to have to, and the cost was going to be, we're throwing around numbers like, $500 million. So incredible amount of money. The Salmon Creek crossing is a very good possibility. I do agree. I would also say that really the number one priority, and it's been on the city's list for engineering for quite a number of years for long-term planning, is the bench road. Really, before we build a crossing, we need a bench road to kind of deal with what's going on. And I would say that there's a lot of, like many people have brought up, there's lots of issues on the traffic that I think is a lot of interpretation there that we need to look at before we just jump into this. So thank you.
Mr. Thaler, thank you for coming and testifying tonight. Now up, Catherine Coghill, on deck, Nancy Waterman.
Thank you.
Ms. Coghill, introduce yourself. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I bought my first home in downtown Douglas in the year 2001, and I've never had issues with congestion. I've also never felt that my safety was compromised because there was only one bridge. I think those are important concerns. I have moved to North Douglas. I now experience North Douglas, and I still feel exactly the same. Access has never been a problem for me, and congestion has never been a problem for me. I feel that a second crossing is a luxury. Yes, it does improve some emergency options, but it's not a necessity. I feel like necessities right now would be improving the ferry system if we're going to put money into things, or more money into the hospital for home care services that we currently don't have. I work at Bartlett. I'm speaking as myself, though, as a representative. The biggest problem with the Mendenhall Peninsula, I appreciate that it's technically outside the wetlands. It's horrendously expensive. It's just, we can't afford this. We've got property taxes going up. We've got so many projects that we need to fund. We shouldn't be funding a luxury. We should be funding our necessities. Finally, my feeling is if we absolutely are going to go with the bench road, I feel the Salmon Creek has the least financial impacts, the least wetlands impacts. But I also second what many people have said here tonight. We need a bench road first. Before we get all this extra traffic over there, we need the infrastructure to deal with it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Coghill. Now up, Nancy Waterman, on deck, Donna Hi. Hey. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and members of the Public Works Committee,
Introduce yourself
CBJ.
and say what part of town you're from.
I'm Nancy Waterman and I live downtown. Thank you for taking CBJ interest in this project. And that's my point of view tonight. When you look from downtown across to Douglas, you look practically right at Eagle Crest and to the Gold Belt CBJ property on West Douglas. Think outside the box. Perhaps there's a second crossing that tunnels from the original bridge or its secondary construction through the mountain to the Gold Belt CBJ property on the northwest side of Douglas, avoiding the North Douglas Highway. Additional elements to benefit Douglas Island: mature the bench road, plan, design, and work it. Number two, there are short-term plans, perhaps, for emergency redundancy on Douglas Island. Combine the existing library fire department with a substation for the police person, and also maybe something medical there. Additional elements to benefit all of the city and borough of Juneau. Mature a plan for improved water distribution. We now have two systems, Gold Creek and Salmon Creek, but the distribution system isn't mature. Where do the improvements to the water system cross? And therefore, does that influence where the alternative second crossing should be? Additionally, the sewer. Where are the improvements to the sewer system, especially when we look at the master plan for the new growth area at Northwest Douglas, including the CBJ property and the Gold Belt property? Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was Nancy, Miss Waterman. Thank you so very much. Okay. Donna, hey. Donna? I'm sorry, what was that? Okay, that's all right. We appreciate you coming tonight. I think the next name is Abraham Lech. No comment. You skip your turn as well. Yes, sir. Nick Matisse. I see you, Nick. And then on deck, Jim Triplett. Mr. Matisse, if you could introduce yourself and what part of town you live in, and you have 2 minutes, you may begin.
My name is Nicholas Matisse. I live on North Douglas. I just want to say I absolutely love the idea of putting a tunnel straight across to the Gold Belt stuff on the other side, so we don't even have to deal with it. Couple quick things. I live on North Douglas. I commute to the airport 4 to 5 days a week. I have never had an issue with the commute. Never feel unsafe being far from the hospital. I mean, obviously, as Juneau expands, if it's going to expand, not really projected to grow too much, but that's neither here nor there. It seems like it's a solution in need of a problem. You know, all the proposed crossings, the one that would be the most effective, the Mendenhall Peninsula, seems like it's a non-starter, and Salmon Creek seems like the one everyone wants to do because it's the simplest and easiest, but it really doesn't get you very far. It's such a short time difference from the bridge downtown, and at the end of the day, it's not really saving much. And then tying it into a bench road that doesn't exist currently just seems backwards. It seems like the bench road should go in first, and it should be well planned in conjunction with a crossing that would give better improvements rather than just slap another bridge like it's the East River in New York. So I'm not really in favor of any of the crossing ideas until there's a comprehensive North Douglas transportation plan that involves a bench road and sort of a bigger plan than just let's put a bridge up. Thanks.
Mr. Matisse, thank you for coming this evening. Now up, Jim Triplett, followed by Frida Westman. Mr. Triplett, introduce yourself. Say what part of town you're from. You have 2 minutes, and you may begin when ready.
Yeah, I'm Jim Triplett.
Make it green again. Touch the red button on the thing. There you go.
Okay, now it's on. Okay, I'm Jim Triplett. I live at Sunny Point, so you can probably guess that I'm not in favor of a Sunny Point crossing. I was born and raised here. I like the fact that Juneau is our capital city. We have a beautiful drive from the airport to downtown. We don't want to mess it up. We don't want to destroy the Mendenhall Game Refuge. My feeling is and I think legally it needs to be out of the refuge. Salmon Creek would be my favorite location. It would also be the least expensive, and we wouldn't be disturbing the refuge. A lot of people have spoken about the bench road, and the bench road should be a critical part of any crossing. The current North Douglas Road is at best a collector road. It's used for people to get home. There's multiple driveways coming onto the North Douglas Highway. There are people park along on the way. It's not a safe road for a transportation road. And years ago, we started talking about the need for a bench road in Douglas. And for some reason, it never caught on and it never got studied. And I'm talking as far back as when we first started talking about the second crossing was when the native land selection came to be, and the native selected land on the backside of Douglas. They came before our planning commission and started talking about the bench road. They favored at the time the Mendenhall Peninsula. And that, of course, might be ideal for them, but it's also the most expensive. The least expensive at all is the Salmon Creek and the shortest. And it does the least amount of, it's actually outside of the game refuge. So you're not going to face all those problems like anything you try to do in a refuge, you're liable for reimbursement of the no net loss of wetlands. And
Mr.
that hasn't
Triplett,
come up yet, I don't think, but that has to be figured into the cost of anything that happens in the wetlands.
Mr. Triplett, thank you for coming and testifying this evening. We greatly appreciate your time here. Thank you. Now up, Frida Westman. On deck, Mary Irving.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify this evening. My name is Frida Westman. I live on North Douglas. And like many people here tonight, I do not think a second crossing is necessary. And I think that we have been falsely led to choose a crossing, an alternative, if we say no to a crossing. Like, what if you say no, what, how about another option? Well, I think we need to protect the refuge and the wetlands. They are so much a part of this place. I get to look at them every day, and I use the land. I pick berries, I walk, I hear birds, and I get a tremendous amount of enjoyment from that. And I don't think that we need a crossing. I think services on North Douglas, such as a sewer line, would be good. So there are many things that money could be used for. And like someone else mentioned tonight, it's a luxury that and a solution looking for a problem. And I'm against it. And I would like, above all, the wetlands and the refuge to remain for all to enjoy, for my grandchildren. Thank you.
Ms. Westman, thank you for coming and testifying tonight. Now up, Mary Irvine. On deck, Mary Ann, looks like Dickerman. Ms. Irvine, if you introduce yourself and say what part of town you're from, you have 2 minutes, you may begin.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Mary Irvin, and I'm honored to live and work on Slinganani. I'm a 35-year resident of Juneau, and I am one of the lucky ones. I live right on Hut Point. That's in the Bayview subdivision, North Douglas. I'm here tonight to speak against the Mendenhall Peninsula crossing and against either of the Sunny Point alternatives. The Mendenhall crossing would be the furthest route to the hospital and the most expensive, as has already been discussed. Much has been said tonight about wetlands, and all of it is true. All of us value wetlands, but please remember, let us remember where wetlands come from. They come from places that feed the wetlands, like Fish Creek. The Fish Creek watershed is one of the most intact, dark, and wild watersheds near town. And it has been set aside for many, many years and is in the comprehensive plan that Juneau recognizes. I'm here tonight to ask you to respect the Fish Creek Park and think about placing any highway or crossing as far away from that park as humanly possible. That park is a wild place and it's totally underrated. I'd also like to call your attention to the fact that the islands in the middle of the refuge, in the middle of the Mendenhall refuge, those islands, even though they were dredge islands and man-made, cultural use of those islands has grown in the past 45 years. I practice cultural use on those islands, even to this day, and others do as well. I would echo that traffic studies need much, much more detail. North Douglas Highway is a residential road that yours truly got a speeding ticket on, and I regret it. I regret speeding on that road beyond 45 miles an hour. There's kids
Ms. Irvin.
in the winter, in the rain, in the dark, waiting for the bus on the North Douglas Highway. I'll wrap up by simply asking you to please focus on alternatives closer to the hospital, such as Salmon Creek, such as Vanderbilt, or Twin Lakes. And thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you tonight.
Ms. Irvine, thank you for coming and speaking with us this evening. Now up Mary Ann Dickerman. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for coming this evening. Next up, looks like Stephen. No, I didn't catch this last name. Stephen Sorensen. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Sorensen, come on up. On deck, Linnea Osborne, it looks like. Only a couple more. All right. Mr. Sorensen, if you just introduce yourself, say what part of town you're from. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Yeah, my name is Steve Sorensen. I live at Sunny Drive on Sunny Point. I believe that I've been here for 42 years, and we've had discussions on the second crossing almost repeatedly during those 42 years. So it might come to fruition. Two things that come to my mind. One is that if you're solely interested in having another crossing to Douglas Island, Salmon Creek is the best. If you're interested in having the valley have access to downtown, if Egan Drive is boggled up with traffic accidents, which we have numerous times during the summer and the winter time, then they have an alternative to go through the Mendenhall Peninsula route and get on to Douglas Island and then get to downtown. And people who live on Sunny Point could go that way to get to the valley, because there's a lot of enterprise and economic development in the valley already that Juneau residents use. And if we can't access through the Egan Drive, maybe we could access it by going over the Mendenhall Peninsula and then into that area. So those are the two areas that I would suggest. If you're interested only in having access to Douglas Island, Salmon Creek makes the best sense. If you're interested in having access so that the valley can get to downtown, as well as everybody else getting to the valley, then the Mendenhall Peninsula route is the best. Thank you.
Mr. Sorensen, thank you for coming and testifying tonight. I believe the next name is Linnea Osborne. On deck, Wayne Carnes. Ms. Osborne, if you just introduce yourself, tell us what part of town you live in. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Good evening. My name is Linnea Osborne. I reside at 6430 North Douglas. The Osbornes have been living there since 1967 when they relocated from downtown Juneau. And in our opinion, I'm not a member of any association. We represent our family only. A second crossing is needed and is past due. We support the West Sunny side, a Sunny Point option for 4 safety reasons that benefit all Juneau. First of all, it's a closer proximity to the airport fire hall, bringing first responders closer to those that are involved in recreational accidents of any kind or a fire increases your chance of survival. And in cases of fire, It may also reduce the toll that a fire, in a spread of a fire that can be catastrophic, especially in places like Fish Creek and some of these others, putting critical habitat at risk. So having a closer access to a fire hall and first responders, I think, is really worthy of consideration. Additionally, it reduces the risk to highway users. I've been walking this highway, North Douglas Highway, for 35 years. There are marathons, there's bikers, there's a lot of recreational users, as well as those that just like to drive down there and see a sunset in North Douglas. We drive to the end of the road every night practically and walk one of the trails. It reduces the congestion in town and increases the safety for all residents. I sat in through 2 cycles of lights on Tuesday in the afternoon, because now with the new construction, the new road configuration going into town, if you're a big bus or a semi or any other large vehicle, you want to be on many other vehicles, you want to be in that right lane when you're coming in, because you're not going to a left turn exit. It also has, the one feature is it's a bypass for emergency vehicles when Egan and Glacier Highway are shut down, and that's critical. There are other reasons. It improves access for birders and hikers to the Mendenhall Refuge, which we—
Ms. Osborne, thank you so much for coming and testifying today. We greatly appreciate it. Now up, Wayne Carnes, and on deck, Tel Brown. Mr. Carnes, if you'd introduce yourself, tell us what part of town you live in. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Hello. Excuse me. My name is Wayne Carnes. I live out in North Douglas. I thought it was warm outside until I came in this room. Whew. But I want to focus on safety. And I've lived out North Douglas for 33 years. I backcountry ski, I hike, I deer hunt. I think the only time I've ever felt unsafe is walking along North Douglas Highway. And I know there's been some talk about, well, what if the bridge goes out? How are the people on the island going to be safe? How are they going to get to the hospital? There are lots of boats, there's lots of skiffs, and there's even a heliport. So if things really went sideways, there's actually lots of emergency access to the mainland. In relationship to the second crossing, I don't believe we need a second crossing. There's a better use of that money elsewhere in Juneau, more valuable projects. But before we have a second crossing, if we decide to go down that road, we need a bench road first. That needs to be first before the second crossing. And the whole plan of where the second crossing is going to go needs to be tied in with access to the bench road, because somebody's house is going to get creamed. And the worst part is somebody is going to be living right next to this project. So we really need to be thinking about the people who are going to be directly affected by this crossing. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Mr. Carnes, thank you for coming this evening and testifying. Now up, Tel Brown. And that completes our list of people that are in the room. We're going to go to Zoom after Mr. Brown here. If you'd introduce yourself, say what part of town you're from. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Yeah, my name's Tel Brown. I live in the Valley. And the only thing I haven't heard point brought up is the potential to take away hunter access to the wetlands. I mean, we have some of the best waterfowl hunting in the state, and I may be just biased to that because I live here, but the potential to take away over half, almost half of the access is something that needs to be addressed. And it just can't stand those spots at Sunny Point, either one of them, in my opinion. And you're not just taking it away from guys like me, but you're taking it away from our youth here in Juneau. A lot of my friends who grew up here, that's how they stayed out of trouble. You know, they go out hunting every day. It's hard to get in trouble when you have a passion like waterfowl. So any crossing that affects access for hunters, in my opinion, is not worth it. And that's all.
Mr. Brown, thank you for coming. That concludes our list of people that are in the room. Is there anyone in the room that has been inspired to come and give us more testimony? Upon hearing your neighbors, please come up and join us if you'd like to You have 2 minutes, ma'am. Just introduce yourself. Tell us what part of town you're from, and you may begin.
I'm Jackie Triplett. I live on Douglas Island, not Douglas Island, excuse me, Sunny Point. I look at Douglas Island every day, but living on Sunny Point, we live on a cliff. We look over the refuge. It's beautiful. We're seeing the mountains, everything. But a lot of people come to the refuge, just as many as the geese and the ducks. And we have owls that come in at a certain time of year, and you're sleeping and you hear one goes, hoo, hoo, and it's waiting for the other one to answer, hoo, hoo. And it's a beautiful place. We see deer crossing. We do have bear problems coming over from Douglas, but people, you see people out there with their children. You know, they walk their dogs, which we want on a leash, but it's a wonderful place. Watching the tides come in, going out, seeing people in kayaks, little boats, and big boats go when it's really high tide. It's a wonderful place. And I'm thrilled to see people out there using it and admiring the animals that come there. And that's my story. Thank you.
That was almost 2 minutes, Miss Triplett. Thank you for sharing the owls with us. I appreciated that part. Okay, so I'm going to switch over. We're going to go to the Zoom in the room. I think we have 4 people on Zoom. Is committee okay still? We can power through this. Okay. First up on Zoom, Bruce Baker. Mr. Crabtree. And I have to read my blurb.
Can you hear me? This is Bruce Baker.
Yes, Mr. Baker, give me just 1 second. I'm going to give instructions for people on Zoom to provide public testimony. Director Kester, I don't believe we are allowing anybody to do the raise hand, which is what this blurb is for. Is that only people that have signed up?
Correct. Only people that
Okay.
have signed up. So
I'm going to skip the blurb for Kester. And I'm going to go straight to Mr. Baker. If you could just tell us what part of town you're in, and you have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Thank you. I'm Bruce Baker. I live on Douglas Island, and I am one of 112 Juneau residents who have signed the Friends of Fritz Cove petition opposing the Mendenhall Peninsula option. First, it would not reduce congestion during peak periods on the existing bridge. Second, it would be the longest and most expensive second crossing alternative, requiring a very costly bridge across Fritz Cove and a new road down the Mendenhall Peninsula. Third, it would not reduce travel time for medical and other first responders and would create the longest route to the hospital if the existing bridge were closed for any reason. From the city of Douglas, work, shopping, and school bus travel times would be extraordinarily long if the existing bridge were laid up for any reason. Fourth, it would have a significant impact on Fritz Cove marine life. And finally, hopes for the development of the west side of Douglas Island are dubious because Juneau's population is simply not increasing significantly, and many government offices are moving to the Anchorage area. Thank you.
Thank you for testifying this evening, Mr. Baker. Next up, could you pull over John Bush?
He does not appear to be online.
All right, Mr. Bush, we're going to give you 3 more seconds to raise your hand. And no, Mr. Bush. Next up would be Mark Johnson. Is Mark Johnson still online? If you would bring Mr. Johnson over.
I'm here.
Mr. Johnson, thank you for coming and testifying tonight. If you could let us know what part of town you're in. You have 2 minutes and you may begin when ready.
I'm in Bayview, North Douglas. Yes, thank you for giving me the opportunity. I just want to, first of all, support comments made by Mary Irvin and Bruce Baker, as well as Linnea Osborne, because one of my frustrations, I've lived out here 35 years, and I had a career involved in emergency response and recognized that living out where we do in North Douglas, we're outside what the American Heart Association considers the chain of survival area. and if you have a heart attack, and so, et cetera. And so my hope in this whole thing is that somehow we focus on the existing population and don't think about what future development may or may not be. And originally I was just looking at the map, and I know there are computer programs that can give you, accurate response times, but it looked to me like from the Valley Fire EMS station that Sunny Point would be the best location, but I also recognize the protection of the wetlands as a priority. And I was wondering if, for example, if Salmon Creek is chosen, that maybe an ambulance could be co-located at the hospital and somebody could crunch the numbers to see how that might improve response times. And that wouldn't affect the fire response times, presumably. But I do recognize the need to protect the wetlands. I do not like the idea of the Mendenhall Peninsula one for many of the reasons already stated. And I just would ask that somehow, I believe that some of us at North Douglas have worse response times available to us than probably, and I think this is an educated guess based on my experience, 90 to 95% of the people in Alaska, including a lot of people in much smaller areas. So please keep that in some consideration when you make these decisions. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, thank you for coming and testifying tonight. The next person was tentative online. Do we have a Linda Baker? If you want to bring Miss Baker over. Miss Baker is the last person who has signed up to testify, but if anybody in the room wants one more bite at the apple, we can, ma'am, you're welcome to testify. All right, Mr. Crabtree, do we have Miss Baker over? Miss Baker, if you're talking, we cannot hear you. Miss Baker, could you maybe try *6 to unmute your telephone?
Miss Baker is showing up as muted. I'm asking her to unmute now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Crabtree. We'll give Miss Baker just another moment to figure out unmute. Mr. Crabtree, does it appear she's trying to come over and participate?
No, it does not appear so.
Okay. I think we'll conclude Miss Baker's opportunity. Is there anyone else left in the room? Ma'am, please, if you would introduce yourself, let us know what part of town you're from.
Hi.
2 minutes.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Kaya Johns. I live in North Douglas. I have both a dog and a congenital heart defect, and pretty much the only time I've ever felt unsafe living on North Douglas is walking that road with my dog. So not in favor of really any of the bridges, but I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. John. Is there anyone else that wishes to testify this evening? Going once, twice? Okay. I'm going to bring it back to the committee as we have almost perfectly timed this public testimony. Would any of you care to address the public or say what you guys, what your experience has been through this Pell study? And Mr. Smith?
Just to say thanks for people for showing up and letting us know your perspectives, good diversity of opinions and really good perspective. So thank everyone for being here tonight.
All right. And again, this is how you make a difference. The last time that we had public testimony, that information went and had an impact, and proof positive is the Mendenhall Peninsula alternative coming back. So we will compile this. And yes, ma'am. Her question was about the deep water port. And while a deep water port has been one of the things that could be one of the potential outcomes, there hasn't been a focus or an energy to like pinpoint where a deep water port would be. We are still wrestling with the issue of if or where a bridge should be, which would then impact the ability. Would a deep water port make sense with what we are trying to do? Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, can I get you to come up here? I'm having a hard time hearing you, and that way everyone listening can hear the question. Oh. No, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, we're not in a question and answer period. That was a breach of protocol on my part. I will stick around afterwards and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. Mr. Smith, will be more than happy to stick around and answer a couple of questions. Forgive me for that breach of protocol. Director Kester, is there anything else that we would like to let the public know this evening?
And thank you, Chair Bryson. Just let everyone know that this listening session will be posted. The presentation has been posted online that has a timeline. Mr. Noble talked about the timeline. And I know Chair Bryson has the intention to periodically have these public listening sessions. That is, again, in addition to the Pell process. So you may be a little bit public process to death. We appreciate your patience as you comment to different organizations. Please trust that we're all reading those comments and listening to those comments. People like to comment in different ways, and that's why I know that the committee really wanted to provide this opportunity. So appreciate everyone staying engaged, and we will continue these opportunities as the project progresses.
All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Seeing none, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you for coming this evening.